Welcome back to another episode of the Social Impact to Level Up podcast. It's me, Wendie V, and we are here to talk about living the dream. In this episode, I wanted to actually open up a little bit more as your host and to bring you into my world of what is it that I do? Who am I? Where did I come from? How did I get here? All of these really basic questions. And I thought, what better way to do that than to just interview myself? So, in this episode, you'll get to hear a little bit more about me and probably learn a few things that you never knew, even those of you who actually know me pretty well. And today we are celebrating my birthday. In this episode, I really wanted to have this opportunity so that you could hear more about who's behind this podcast, what exactly is the business that I run, or what am I doing here, and how can I really just help to serve all of the people who are in this community. So that's what this episode is about. Stay tuned and let's jump right into today's interview. All right. So, Wendie, you are 43 years old today. You're not afraid to tell people how old you are. And it's been a long journey. So, I'm really curious in these 43 years, what do you have to show for the journey? What do you have to show for it?
Man, 43 years and what do you have to show for it? That's kind of a hard question. I feel like I finally feel this sense of contentment or that I have my purpose figured out and that I'm in a place to offer to other people. How can you go about figuring out where your place of contentment and your offering to the world is, right? Like, what does that mean? And it took so long to get here because I was so busy, I think, trying to figure out what are those milestones that I needed to hit as a human. And I thought there were these ages that I had to do things by, like I had to get married by this age, or I had to have kids by this age, or I had to have my career advanced by this age so I could be managing people by this age. And all of those benchmarks didn't sort of end up leading me to happiness or didn't really help me feel more fulfilled. And the more that I tried to make them happen, the less that they actually happened. And I realized that by going through this sense of, going into the government and working for a long time at helping nonprofits and schools and other organizations to do this work in the impact space, what I found was that the contentment that I had and the joy that I had was in seeing those grow and sustain themselves. And although it wasn't, my personal mission, it was more my professional mission. It is a mission that I think is my purpose. And so after going through these growing pains in my career, I will say that I detail in season 1 of the podcast, it took me a minute before I could restart after experiencing different types of career hardships that I'm sure a lot of people have experienced, like job loss or discrimination or just the lack of opportunity for advancement or burnout. All of these really common things that happen in the impact space for people who work to help other people and use their career as a way to serve their personal and professional mission. It gets really difficult at some point to keep moving forward if you don't come to a place of contentment or come to a place of happiness with what it is that you're doing. And not only what you're doing, but how you are doing it. And that was the part. It was like that thing, that one right there, that I just felt like, okay, this is not for me anymore. The government piece, the way that it works, the bureaucracy, all of the things, it's just not for me. And I had to really give up a big part of what I considered myself or my identity, because up until then, that had been my professional self. I had to give that up to be able to establish what I wanted, which was more freedom of time, more freedom of space to make decisions, more who can I help and how I can help, and why I help, those decisions that were really important to me, why I needed to make those on my own versus on someone else's terms. So I think to answer the question, like, what have I accomplished or so what? Like, what have I got to in these 43 years? I think I finally got to a place where I'm able to blend all of the things I want and that I don't want professionally and personally into a lifestyle that makes me happy and that allows me the space to build my network, to connect with others, to support other businesses, to offer to nonprofits that can't afford my services, pro bono services, to be able to work on large scale and small scale impact projects, to think about things strategically and systemically, and to focus on sustainability.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of things happened along the way, but you finally found the right spot to be in to really serve others, which has been really what your purpose has been about for a very long time. So that doesn't surprise me. Now, thinking about where you're going from here, and, you know, do you feel like you're living the dream right now? Are you in the place you want to be? And are you living the dream?
Am I living the dream? That's such a, I think so. I don't know because the dream changes, right? Like when you're a little kid, you have this version of the dream where you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. And then you have this version of the dream when you're an adult where you just want to not work behind a desk and like teach skiing or something or have like a hostelria in Costa Rica, which I thought of both. And then now that I kind of feel like I have more of a alignment between my lifestyle and my purpose and what I want to do and how I interact with others and how I connect with my work, I think that it really just is about recognizing that I'm at the place I wanted to be several steps ago. So where I have the podcast and a whole season completed or 2 seasons completed and where I have clients and I have money coming in the door and I have the work that I want or I have the types of work that I want or the projects that I like to work on or the people who need my help easily find me online. Like those are all places that are for me a privilege at this point because I haven't always had that, right? Or I haven't always had that in my business or even in my journey as a person, just as a professional, haven't always been able to say, I have control over my schedule and my time, or I can choose to or not choose to do this or that. And I think that that is sort of living the dream, but there's more to the dream. And I think that it's on the personal level of continuing to grow and explore as a person, to see what's out there, to feel like there's more opportunities that will present themselves and continuing to be open to it. And having this growth mindset that is something that we talk about a lot in entrepreneurship or as entrepreneurs. But I think the growth mindset part that we forget is that when you're seeing yourself move forward, you have to reflect and realize that you took a while to get there and be thankful for that. And to every moment where there's something scary or every moment where there's some piece of me that has to be extended in my journey, I'm constantly reminding myself of sit down and reflect and be grateful, or sit down and take a moment to be just humble for where you've come to and every single step that it's taken for you to get to this particular point. Because 4 or 5 steps ago, you probably wouldn't have even anticipated that this would be exactly where you would be at the moment. And so as an entrepreneur, as you kind of continue to grow or having this journey that you're on unfold in front of you, it's important to always take stock and be grateful for the places and spaces that you've been in that allowed you to be exactly where you are right now.
Growth mindset is so important. When we are really young, it's hard to think about how to move in the right way or go to the right answer or solution for you to get to the next step. having a growth mindset is probably the number one thing that moved the needle forward throughout the process. So I'm not surprised that that came up. And in thinking about all of the places that we've had to grow from or move forward from, what is the thing that you are the most proud of?
Oh my gosh. Back in grad school, I was just so surprised to even be there. I think that that's probably where I first started understanding this concept of growth mindset and needing to keep pushing forward. But I didn't have it quite all worked out because there was always this like not having enough sleep, not eating right, pushing forward, feeling like everything was an uphill battle, constantly also wanting to make space to party, I will admit. But it was just so hard to get through that space. And so, although it was difficult and it was a series of moving rapidly forward in my growth trajectory as a human, and I'll say more about that in a second, it really was essential for me to get here to go through that there. And so I guess what I'm really proud of is that I got through it, right? Like that it was possible for me who was let's see, as a Latina in eighth grade, I couldn't even imagine going to college, who had to kind of fight to stay in and get into and be in the honors track when I didn't monetarily or in other aspects really meet the same standards as some of the students, but had to academically to be there and to compete, to go to college, really push myself forward. And so what I'm really, I think, proud of is just being able to do the things that I did, take the steps and the risks and the things that I had to do to get to grad school. But then once I got there, I was like, I'm not going to go just to grad school in California where I grew up. I'm going to go as far as possible to be as competitive as possible in my field. And since I chose social work or had been enlightened to in my internship in undergrad, the fact that I'm really aligned with social work, I thought, how could I make the biggest impact that I possibly can make? And so then I went into the policy level track of social work thinking, I always want to be amplifying, like, how can I get to more people or how can I help more? And so when I got to grad school, I really kind of started finding my voice in this space of helping others and to understand that I was a leader or that I was going to be a leader and needing to step into spaces of student government or student leadership or to think about how I can, balance my work as a professional, as a social worker in my practicum with my work as a student worker and a researcher in my side job and also still study, right? And so all of these things had to happen. And it was this very rapid growth trajectory. And then come the second year when I took a lot of very challenging classes, which have all served me very well over the course of my career, I ended up moving to Uganda for 6 months to do field research and to look at the needs of schools who were being funded and supported by a Catholic parish and to really think about what community needs and how does that work. And it was the first time in my career that I had been challenged to actually sit down and think about community and perspectives that weren't yours, but that you were the guardian of, or that perspectives would be offered to you as someone coming to document things like needs, and that you had to be a good steward of. And it was one of the first times that I truly understood service leadership. What does this mean? This concept to be not one of, but to be a representative of. And I think over the course of my career as an impact professional, as a consultant, as any things that I do, any of my titles that I have, this understanding of like community and how can you really represent community well and represent community need at the core of all of the work that you do, or how do you have community ownership or not even just buy-in, but really to focus on this aspect. of the work, this has always been something I'm not only fascinated about, but continuing to understand how to grow into as a person and as a professional. And I think that we all should be understanding of this if we're in this impact space, because it's it's the people that we serve, it's the communities that we serve, it's the folks who need the help that really are the people who, kind of are in charge. And so it's always, as somebody who is a leader or who has a big voice or who has, the power, the privilege to represent others, it's always about how do you understand and know more, to know that at a deeper level, so that then when you are when you're actually doing the work that we do, you can accurately make decisions and you can also represent the best interests of the people that you serve.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. The moment of coming back from traveling abroad in Africa and graduating and having all these things happen, like a career start and a fellowship and all this stuff in 6 months. It's so reminiscent of the first story where all of the job transition stuff like happened in the first 6 months of your journey as an entrepreneur. So it's kind of interesting because there's almost like this 20-year gap. Oh, sounds rough. 20-year gap of like parallels between the first time this all went down and the immediate amount of growth and like change that happened at once. And then this sort of unfolding of entrepreneurship and this sense of growth and overcoming that had to happen in order to get to the fulfillment of the purpose, right? So many pieces of the story like have come together over the course of years, not necessarily just in the most recent time. And I think people who don't know the story or haven't really known you that long wouldn't understand how all of these things have been really parallel to each other. So in knowing that this journey has been so long, what is your biggest regret? Like, what is one of those things that you think back and you're like, oh, God, okay. And I know there are a lot of them. So I'm going to force you to really think about what is the number one that you would share because we don't have all day. We really don't.
What's been the biggest regret? I think like just not believing in myself really enough, not understanding my power, not stepping into my power. People say that all the time, but for me, it was just a really fearful place of thinking that I needed to have somebody else provide my paycheck to pay me, that it was impossible to build a business. I didn't even know before 2018 how to make a business or how to start a business. I had no concept of what generating your income meant and how can you bring in more income, or what are the steps that you can take in order to make these things possible for yourself. And now I recognize coaching people through that initial discovery process of packaging services and pricing services, and to really connect with their deepest why and be able to answer those questions for themselves of how much is this worth. It's a lot about breaking down the barriers and being ready to break down some of those barriers, like to really be able to ask yourself some critical questions and then to have these answers that you explore with yourself over time. And you're not always ready to do it linearly. And so that's why having a coach sometimes, like, especially if your coach's processes are already linear, it's like, okay, let's go from here to here to here. Like sometimes some of my processes are, some people are like, whoa, I'm not ready for that yet because I'm still like over here. And I think that that's one of the benefit I found of having coaches or having people that you work with is even if you're not ready for it, having tools or resources, just someone who's coming up and saying, yes, but you need to go there because you need to get ready for it because it's going to come up. And somebody who's gone there before you to be able to offer those things to you is really important. So I think that although I regret waiting, I understand that I was probably even when I first sought coaching, just barely ready to be receptive of that feedback. That is part of the coaching process that allows you to be in the growth mindset, that allows you to make the changes or take the steps or build the foundation that you need to make to build a business or to move forward. And over time, I came to understand that part of the problem of me not moving forward was myself, and that I need to get out of my own way. And that realization came to me when I was actually being attuned to Reiki for Reiki 2, the advanced practitioner Reiki. And in the process of undergoing this attunement to energy healing, I had a kind of awakening or understanding that the way forward for me was to get out of my own way. And so it was a very pivotal moment, I think, where I feel like it happened at the right time. And then after that, the continuing of the unfolding or the unraveling or the breaking down of what used to be happened for a long time, for probably about a year and a half, until it finally came to a place of settling or, after that, really moving forward. So I think that in my journey as an entrepreneur and in my journey in the beginning of my career, when I was first a fellow in the federal government and learning all this impact stuff, those things do have parallels, and they do have the sense of this intense amount of moving forward quickly and needing to adjust and understand, and to also take the things that I already had learned and known to be true and moving those forward with me. And how can I package them, and how can I use them? How can I scale them? How can I use them now as an entrepreneur to help to serve other people, to help to support them, to find their purpose and to fulfill their life's mission the same way that I have. And so I think that that's really where I'm at right now.
I think that a lot of people can resonate with this idea of lost time, or feeling like time has been wasted somehow, or that something has just not, I guess, when it unfolds on its own natural timeline, it doesn't seem fast enough for you. And I think that there's always these moments where you want things to speed up. But in retrospect, it's often, I guess, more that you see how the unfolding at the right time happens, right? So thinking about things needing to be faster, it's not always really necessarily the case. So in moving the needle forward on what you're trying to do, what do you think is next? What are the next steps for you? The next steps for what you're trying to accomplish, not only in your business life, but also in your personal life? Where are you going from here? And what is the next year going to bring for you?
Yeah. So what are the next steps for me in scaling and growing is to really think about the community that I want to build around the collective, especially the social impact level of collective, which is this podcast, a newsletter, anything I do with any of my clients, all of the people who are part of this world of impact makers and change makers, and to get some certifications under my belt as a business, the women-owned business, the minority-owned business certifications from the federal government, and move forward into sort of getting everybody together. I think I see things like educational opportunities or places for people to co-plan projects or to learn from each other or to connect around different aspects of social impact work. And I really want to be able to offer the container for those things to happen. And so in my vision of the podcast and where all of this fits and what's next is all about moving into the next phase of what the collective can be as a community and what I need to be a vehicle for change.
Scaling and sustainability and growing as an entrepreneur are really important steps. And of course, certifications are big, important steps as well. Anytime you're growing any kind of entity, always thinking about those pivotal pieces or building blocks that you can take and put in place year after year to really get to where you are. And I think that, people might have seen, building your website or launching social media channels or launching your LinkedIn newsletter that's now at 10,000 subscribers, like those all took little pieces or building blocks. And often when working with clients, there's sort of this breaking down of the strategy to put the pieces in place, but you can't go straight to like copywriting or trademarking or to some of these more complex pieces until you have those building blocks in place, until you have the thought processes and the processes in place. And so it's, of course, scaling is the next step once you have some of those fundamentals and they're available to you to leverage to get to that next phase. So as an entrepreneur, obviously every day matters, and every day forward that you can go can help to grow whatever it is that you're doing. So what makes you do what you do every single day? Why do you do what you do every day?
I do what I do every single day because I understand that there are a lot of people who want to do good based on their own life experiences, and they don't know how, or they don't know where to start, or they're not exactly sure what that means for them. And there are ways to be more efficient and effective at this work. And the more that we can try to do those things, the better the work will be, or the better outcomes we'll be able to reach. And so I wake up and think about how can I support others to be more efficient and effective, and to make sure that as we serve the communities and the people that we serve, that we are making the impact that we actually want to make.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest barriers, is seeing how people are not effective and efficient with their work and exactly what the struggle was all about. So, what do you really believe in? Like, what is it that you really, truly, at your core, believe in?
Going back to the time in Uganda, I think the thing that I saw very clearly was people were really happy despite having nothing. Despite living in poverty and having virtually zero, they were able to find a level of contentment and happiness that I didn't understand at that time, because I was so deeply entrenched in the poverty mindset and the lack mindset that I didn't understand what abundance like, or what it looked like, despite having a lot of things, which as an American is something you kind of do, is you expected to kind of have a lot of things because wealth is generated, and then things are a sign of wealth. And so really what I kind of know that at the core of me is that humanity is really good or happy or can be better. And we have to kind of work at being better. We can't just naturally be in this state of happiness or contentment, because we're often trapped in that lack mindset, or in these places where we're not allowing ourselves, or we're not allowed to be happy and find fulfillment. And I started at the top of this episode talking about that concept of how I'm now feeling more in a space of contentment and fulfillment after a whole lot of things in my own journey. But I think that what I saw, particularly at that time of coming back after being for 6 months living in Uganda in a village with no power and no water, was that people can really feel that same sense of fulfillment and contentment without having the material things that I'm used to having access to. And yes, it is sort of first world problems not having power and water and all the things that we like. But it was very much a thing for me to break down and see the core of what humanity is, and to know it at my core that I do believe humanity is good, and that I do believe that people have had to and have been forced to take advantage of situations or each other in order to move forward, because the systems and the ways that we have been kind of forced as society to interact. And I believe that we can get past these things. However, it does take a lot of effort, and it does take a lot of time, and it does take a lot of investment, and it also does take a lot of people giving and sharing power. So all of these things are a lot to ask, I think. And sometimes, even though I know this at my core, that these are truths, Sometimes I'm very cautious on how I understand them to be true and expect others to operate within that truth.
Yeah, after the time in Uganda, I think that you're right. The understanding of humanity and that people can do better is kind of a fundamental, and how to do better is really the question. And still haven't resolved that one quite yet, but working on it, working on it. So, the next question is, where do you find your sanctuary? Where do you find respite? How do you recharge?
My sanctuary is absolutely my dog. And anytime that I need respite, I just grab her and bury my face into her fur, and everything is better. But I also love to just be outside, be with nature. And over time, I recognize that these are things that are foundational for me. And so, in my own wellness recipe, which you'll hear me talk about sometimes on the podcast, how do we transform our well being as people? It's not only about the foundational pieces of wellness that we like to engage in or that we're sort of used to in our routine, but it's also about the things that stretch us and help us to grow. And so I'm always thinking about, not only I love to be outside in nature, I love to do like physical activity and work out and all of those things. But beyond those things, I also like to explore new cuisines, explore new countries, look at different ways that I can push myself to experience new things in the world. Like maybe I'm going to go climb Mount Kilimanjaro one day. Maybe I'm going to, I don't know, I've already been on safari several times. Like there are things that I just pushed myself in the past to do that are also part of my wellness recipe, because those are the parts of the growth mindset that really are putting into action all the time to make myself sort of a better, more expansive person. So what I'm looking forward to moving into the future is being able to offer myself more of those experiences on my timeline when I want to, or when I feel the need to recharge and to be able to come back and serve others. The need to put my other pieces on back burner or pause to go and take care of myself and my own well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. Wellness is an essential part of any entrepreneur's journey, and committing to that over and over and over again, making sure that it's front and center and it's part of how you're able to continue to show up to serve other people. That has come through again and again in this podcast season. And it absolutely is something that is so important for a lot of people to get a grasp on and to be able to move forward with their work. So absolutely want to maintain the foundations of the wellness recipe, but also thinking about in the new next year or next 5 years, whatever that is, how can I continue to push forward on those pieces that are the higher tier of the wellness recipe, that growth, or that the growth mindset pushing activities that can really make you move forward. And I'm like not surprised that things like climbing Mount Kilimanjaro are sort of on that list of like, what could I possibly do in this next period of my journey, right? What else is there? I don't know yet. We'll see. So you've seen a lot. 43 years is obviously a long time, and wondering now what really bothers you still, and what are you doing about it? What exactly have you done to change that?
What still bothers me is privilege. And I know I mentioned it a couple of times in this episode, but I have seen it more and more times than I care to. And I've also experienced it in myself and had to check myself for even the privileges that I have as a light skinned Latina, as an American, as someone of whatever means I've had, as someone who's been able to pay off their student loans or to get $100,000 degree or to do the things that I've been able to do. You know, there's a lot of privilege. And I think that sometimes um, what we don't do is to really acknowledge it and to move forward. And so what I've had to do about it in my own world is to understand that there's always this push and pull factor of knowing and accepting that you have privilege. And then sometimes as a person who doesn't always have privilege, when you do have it, being able to use it to your advantage to get to the next level of where you need to go. So whether that's having a degree and being able to apply to the programs that I've applied to and gotten, or understanding how grants work and being able to apply to various programs that support minorities or minority-owned businesses and being successful. Those are the kinds of things that I recognize are a privilege, and they're something that I own, right? That's for me, but not everybody does own and understand their own privileges. And not everybody is in a space where they can do anything about it, right? And so I think that what I've done is to be able to not only see the privileges, but also to then help myself to really hone in on what are those action steps that I need to take to change the things that need to be changed in order to operate in a way that I'm sharing power, sharing resources, or not coming from a space of privilege all the time, but are recognizing when I can use privilege to help other people. Yeah. And sometimes also help myself.
That definitely is the biggest change since the 20s into like this realm of time, is how to take the lessons that are happening daily and reflect on them and actualize the learning in the process of your daily life quickly, right? To turn that growth around and to be able to move forward. So it is a journey. And I think with privilege, that is always one of those pieces that anytime a new example comes to life, where you can see the patterns that you can break as a human, there's some room there to really grow into this next version of yourself. So exercising the humility and empathy is really, really important to growing as a person, I think, which I've learned over the past 20-ish years. So, the last question for this interview for you is really about, and of course, this is for you, meaning me and ourselves. But if you had 1 year left, and I know that you reflected on this a lot recently, but if you had 1 year left, what is it that you would spend your time doing? And knowing, yeah, that this is really a big part of your why, and kind of probably what we talked about earlier in this interview.
Yeah, I've had a lot of health scares over the course of my journey, and which is why I'm always in a space of looking for wellness solutions or looking at wellness as a big part of my path. And what I recognize is any year that I'm at this point, if I'm spending my time bringing folks together who are in this impact space, who are making an impact, who are helping each other, who need resources, who need support, and I'm doing something about this mission consistently, then it's a good use of my time and my resources. And so if I only had 1 year left, I think the answer is that I would be doing exactly what I'm doing right now, which is to focus in on how to support people who are change makers and are looking to ultimately change the world. And how do I do that? Through not only the vehicle of my work, but also through this podcast. And so in season 2, we looked at people who were living limitlessly, focusing on the inspirational aspect of social entrepreneurship as an answer to and our alternative to whatever the traditional route of work and career and business have been in the past. But now thinking about moving forward for season 3, it's a lot about how do we sustain the work? How do we really dig in to make change? And what does that mean? And I want to interview and hear from people who are truly doing this work on the ground and are trying to make changes that will see these sort of revolutionary sort of things in our societies. So I'm excited to hear from some of the people that I've already got lined up. I'm also looking to line up more people. So if you're interested, you can reach out and join us on the podcast for season 3. And that will be launching next year. And I'm really excited about it in the spring. So stay tuned for more information about that. But what I'm really, really honing in on for the future of this work is how do we build community? How can we get more folks who are of a similar kind of mentality with the same type of values, like mindset, like-hearted kind of people who are able to work together to really make social change. So that's where we're going, and I'm really excited about it.
Knowing how to create community and bring people together and just help people vibe on the same level is going to be such a massive feat for whatever timeline that gets done in. And even if it's not a year or the next 5 years or whatever, it's a super huge goal. And I can appreciate how the steps that it's going to take to move in that direction are not going to be all done very quickly. But it is something that is really important to be able to bring together and connect all of these different impact making folks who are just somehow drawn into the collective, find out about the podcast, find out about the newsletter, find out about me, find out about whatever, are really just having the ability to bring all of these folks together is going to be a very, very important mission for probably the remainder of my life. So, in that, I hope you enjoyed this episode where we talked with me, the host, Wendie V of this podcast, talking all about what's next and where are we going from here? What is the journey going to include? And all about, what you can expect in the next season of this podcast. So I'm excited to have brought this to you, and stay tuned for another episode of the Social Impact Level Up podcast next week.